things we're dealing with are threats to humanity unlike anything the world has ever seen before.
We can bequeath our children a greener planet and a more prosperous future.
That's what climate change is about. It is literally, not figuratively, a clear and present danger.
If unprecedented changes are not made and made soon, there will be irreversible damage to the planet.
Zero carbon.
East Hall.
Hello and welcome to Zero Carbonista Series 5, Just Stop the Tories. I'm Ian Collins and this is the UK's #1 environment-based podcast. If it's green, it is in. And here's the exciting thing, Dale. We start off with, was there a whistle there?
Yes, a siren outside.
Oh, I
think it's the Tories. The Tories have sent the cops down.
I thought you were supplying some spontaneous sound effects then for a second. Because we have got a new feature here, and it does have a sound effect. What are we calling this, Dale?
Yeah, well, I was thinking right-wing nut or right-wing nut, depending on how you say it, but we just call it the same thing.
Down to the intonation. So if you get it wrong, you've still got it right.
That's right. And it's a kind of broad church, right? We don't care.
Hang on, this is a whole podcast in itself, right?
It could be. Maybe it's the title of the next episode. I mean, series or whatever. I'm thinking it doesn't matter if you're in politics, if you're in the media, or if you're just a nutter, right? You should be in this section. Certainly my week has been fairly dominated, I would say, by encounters with right-wing nuts. When
you kicked off that mighty quilt from your bed on Monday morning, who would have thought that your week would unravel in this way? And it involves everyone from Julia Hartley-Brewer to David Icke to Therese Coffey. So I think we should go through some of these.
Yes. Who do you want to go first?
Well, should we start with our friend Mikey Graham? Because you were on with Mike, weren't you?
Yes, I was. And so here's the story then. The backstory is FDR had a game cancelled last weekend in Mansfield. And I put up a post on social media saying, look, it's not just a waterlogged pitch. The whole city was flooded itself. And there was a whole bunch of videos out there, rivers running down roads. And so I got on his show yesterday, I think it was. And he put up my tweet in the picture of the river. And he says to me, amongst other things, right, it was one of them crazy encounters with Mike. He loves his kind of polemic rants. But I made him smile at the end. I told him to smile at the end, which is quite funny. He says to me, do you know the name of that road? I'm like, come on, tell me, what's the name of the road? He's like, it's River Road. It's called River Road because it floods all of the time. And I'm like, oh, come on. I didn't believe him. In terms of flooding all of the time and that kind of stuff. After the show, somebody from Mansfield posts on social media, there is no road in Mansfield called River Road.
Is that right?
So we did a search and there isn't. And somebody else posted, I've lived here for decades and it's never flooded like this.
Wow.
So Mike is living in a world of his own. I think he's got Julia Hartley-Brewer as a researcher and they're just making shit up.
Because she lives in 23 up Crescent, doesn't she? So,
is that where it is?
Yeah, I think so. So I understand it.
So, she's in this story too because I was nearly on with her earlier in the week. They kept sending me duff Zoom links. Maybe they were fake Zoom links. They didn't really want me on there. So she got to talk about me without me being there. And she's got this kind of
always trouble.
Smug look on her face as she says in this kind of knowing, kind of smug way, she doesn't believe the climate crisis is real. It's not really proven, is it? And then she says, I think Ofcom might have something to say about that. I think you might be right there, Julia. So she's in this news section.
Well, the thing is, when you're on with Mike Graham, it's always fun because he's a nice bloke and he's joshing with you, and you are having a kind of good head-to-head with fundamental disagreements, but no bad feelings.
That's
if
right.
That makes sense.
That's right. He more or less lets me talk, although he was more interrupty this time than he's been for a while. But, he more or less lets me talk.
That's because he's got a shiny new studio.
That's what it is, like a new show, but it's not, is it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so he's got it all, because all the bells and the whistles are happening there. This nice set of angry red around him.
It's gone to his head. That's what's happened.
Just to replicate his mood, which is constantly angry and perpetually pissed off at something or someone.
It's funny.
So Hartley-Brewer has made her way into the feature. Mike Graham is in there, but as a kind of happy associate, I suppose.
Yeah.
What I didn't expect, Dale, was you were going to tell me that David Icke, who has kind of risen almost from the dead, He's always made a lot of noise with his own fan base, but now he's jumping into your timeline.
Yeah, so he's jumped on social media and challenging me to a debate on the facts of the climate crisis. And you know, with that kind of childish approach that some people have, oh, you haven't got the guts to do it, you know, kind of goad me on social media. And so, I mean, I had this recollection of some of the crazy things this man believes, did a bit of digging and stuck a post back up to answer it, right? Like, do I want to discuss the facts of the climate crisis with a man that thinks that it's a fact that shape-changing lizards live among us, they're part of the ruling elite of the world, and they live in a base at the hollowed out center of our Earth? Like, do I want to debate facts with this man? No, I don't think so.
Yeah, but what a fun bloke to have a pint with. I mean, come on, David, do the lizard stories. We love the lizard stories. You'd be glued to this, wouldn't you?
It's crazy, isn't it? It's crazy. Imagine, it's hard enough to talk facts with Mike Graham or Julia Hartley-Brewer, you know, but this man, he thinks the moon was made by those lizard creatures. It's not a real moon.
Yeah, it's not a real moon. It's like there's a switch. You can, it's just like a big bedside lamp.
So he's peak wingnut, as far as I can see, in this new section.
So as Ike carried this week's wingnut of the week.
He has. I mean, easily. I think he's going to be wingnut of the year. I mean, you know.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to that's a shame in a way, because we've kind of peaked on the first go at this new feature with David Icke. We didn't think he was going to give quite so much in this first introduction of the piece.
On a different frontier, we've got another candidate, Therese Coffey, who I was briefly human shield for at a previous Tory conference when the media were trying to interrogate her on the escalator. She kept me between her and them. And
she was like your bodyguard.
It was the other way around.
Well, you were
I was
her bodyguard.
Human shield.
You brilliantly just, either as an act of chivalry or just, you know, basic decency, one of the two, or either, you know, as a quiet fanboy of Therese Coffey, maybe. I don't know, Dale. But you stepped into action and you helped her.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to claim credit for it. She was very deft in her moving to keep me always between her and them. But the thing is, she appears in the media this week. I mean, it's an exceptional intervention. She's in the House of Commons, waving her hands around to point from east to west. And she says, with a very serious face, you must believe it, we're used to handling rain when it comes from the west. But the problem with that storm, Babette, whatever it's called, is the rain came from the east and we didn't know what to do with it. I'm like, what? WTF?
From the east? What's it, like a Cockney storm? Is that what it is?
Who knows? But how do people like that get into power? That's her explanation for the flooding. It came from the wrong direction. That's a British Rail kind of excuse.
That's an absolute British Rail moment. It's leaves on the line territory, isn't it? So storms that come from the, I mean, you know, also geographically speaking, depends on where you stand on planet Earth as to what is east and west in that respect. So I'm just trying to work out if there is a sort of muddled logic.
I don't think there is.
In such a bizarre statement.
I think it also depends on where you stand on planet England as well, right? Because I mean, I've lived in the east of England and we're used to storms coming in from the east. But anyway, no, it's all nonsense, right? It's almost as much nonsense as shape-shifting lizard people. So,
yeah, if this was a sitcom, it would now just cut to a scene of Therese Coffey and David Icke having a pint in a pub.
They probably are, right?
Yeah,
but that's where she's getting her material from. He's like, say this, Therese, no, they'll buy it.
I like that. I think we're never going to run out of material on Right Wing Watch.
Right Wing Watch. You just renamed it.
So I've just completely renamed it. We're never. Obviously, we won't cut this bit out. But if this was, you know, if this was a far different operation, we would cut it out and pretend it didn't happen. So we're never going to run out of material on Right Wing Nut. I don't think, Dale. It's a good name for a feature.
It's not a bad name.
Think of anything else to call it. Should we move on to Rishi Sunak? Because he's under pressure over net zero and U-turn after U-turn. What's going on here?
Yeah, so this week, the IEA, which is a very authoritative body on energy, have just kind of put out a report, a statement. I'm not sure what it is. I don't think it was aimed at Sunak, but it might as well have been. You know, they say that countries risk fueling the climate crisis and damaging their own economies if they row back on green policies. I mean, that's got Sunak written all over it, right? They're also saying demand for oil and gas will peak before the end of the decade, which I think is good news. And they just call on governments generally, don't derail progress by weakening climate measures, because I like this bit. Wildfires and flooding meant that no country is an island, not even Britain.
There it is.
But there
yeah.
is. So
I can see people phoning up certain radio programs. Go, I think you're fine. Actually, it is an island.
I think you're right.
We are absolutely geographically, we are an island. There's no debate about this.
I think you're right. But it's a lovely. I mean, overall, what I take from that is this is a very authoritative body saying if you row back on green policies, you hurt your economy and you fuel the climate crisis. Is he paying any attention? That's what I want to know.
We've been saying it on this podcast for years.
Yes.
That very point. Let's look at this UN farming body story as well. Ex-officials at the UN farming body say that work on methane emissions, which of course is key and crucial to all of this, was censored. That's a bit disturbing.
Yeah, I have this image in my head of like a panel of scientists kind of trying to suppress a fart, which is, I can't help it. I just think about, methane is coming from cow farts and burps, right? But this is what happened. The work was censored and they've just gone public. About 20 of them, former officials, have gone public to say that, this happened. And actually, the UN have been downplaying livestock emissions under pressure from the farming lobby.
Let's do some questions. Steve says, what do you think about making voting compulsory? Just a quick word while we're on this about your area of interest as well at the moment, Dale, about voting and particularly young people voting.
New campaign, Just Vote. The actual online tag is Just Vote 24 because Just Vote wasn't available. And actually, the election should be in 24, so that'll work out okay. The focus is 18 to 24-year-olds and just encouraging them to vote, actually, to persuade them that it's important that they vote and then to help them vote because the government have made it as hard as possible to keep this group of people from being able to vote.
And do you think compulsory voting is a good idea? There are places that I think Australia,
yes, Australia have it, and I think they have proportional representation as well. And because of that, they have a kangaroo party. Actually, I'm a friend of theirs. We worked together. I kind of took part in one of their events, and there are people that basically lobby for kangaroo protection, but they've got a member of parliament because they have proportional representation. I quite like that. Although
they're called the Kangaroo Party.
Something like that.
I like it.
I think compulsory voting could be a good idea.
It's going to be interesting over the coming years because although I don't think many parties have flagged it, but as people's appetite to fundamentally change our voting system increases, I think at some point it's going to give. Something's going to change.
I think it will. And if we get a Labour government in the coming election, I think I'd probably turn my attention to proportional representation after that in terms of campaigning.
June says, how can we get world politicians to understand what they are leading us all into? It's a very simple question, but you pull your hair out thinking, is anybody, why are people not listening to the evidence here?
Well, I think I got two answers. One is they're shape-shifting lizards, obviously, so they don't give a They want a hot planet. Lizards like that, right?
There is that.
And the other is actually these people, the real answer is that they have really short-term horizons, don't they? The next electoral cycle, and they don't deal in truth or facts or anything like that, and they don't actually have the interest of for the most part, the interest of their electorate in mind. I mean, Rishi Sunak is a classic example. He doesn't give a shit about Britain or Britons. As soon as he get kicked out at number 10, he'll go and live in America. We know that. He's got a green card. He's pledged to do that. And what's he doing in number 10? He's a classic example.
Here's a hydrogen boiler story. A hydrogen boiler push to continue despite the verdict of the UK watchdog. What do we make of this? And what's your take on hydrogen boilers?
To me, it was a really kind of one-eyed review, this report that's been put out by some UK watchdog, the NIC, National Infrastructure Commission, because they looked at hydrogen and the proposal to run the national gas grid on hydrogen, and they only looked at that and concluded that heat pumps were a better option. No shit, Sherlock, right? Because 100% hydrogen is an incredibly inefficient way to run anything. But what they didn't look at is green gas made from grass as an alternative.
Well, and that's not a theory, by the way. This is happening.
That's right. I mean, our green gas mill went live a few weeks ago now. We haven't got around to kind of announcing it yet, but we're pumping gas into the mains now made from grass. And it's not instead of hydrogen. There is a role for hydrogen, about 20% in the grid. All of our appliances can deal with that. So we haven't got any risks. We haven't got to replace anything. We can make that hydrogen when we have too much renewable energy, which will happen as we get to 100%. It'll happen more often. And so there's a perfect kind of combo here, 20% hydrogen in the grid, green gas in the grid, forget the fossil fuels. And heat pumps are okay in some scenarios. I mean, certainly if you can afford the increased electricity bill and stuff like that. But I mean, there's a whole pickle here in terms of how we decarbonize home heating, and no party has really got it. None of these watchdogs have really got it. Nobody's talking about green gas, and we're going to have to work a little bit harder on that one.
Indeed. A couple of food/drink stories here. Low welfare eggs from caged hens imported to the UK in staggering numbers. This is always a very deeply disturbing element of the animal farming world, right?
Yes. I think I read that chickens on the continent, or particularly in Poland, where they're all coming in from, they have a cage the size of a sheet of A4 paper, not literally flat like that, but the footprint of it is a A4 sheet of paper, which is hideous. They live their lives in a cage, no bigger than that, often just a mesh cage as well, so nothing comfortable to sit on. That's so that the poo just falls through the floor where they can kind of shovel it up. Pretty hideous. But what made me laugh about this, is the idea of farmers, running around trying to claim that their chicken abuse is a better form of chicken abuse than somebody else's. You mean our standards, they're not great at all. I mean, they're only mildly less shite than what I was just talking about coming from Poland. And at the end of the day, right, what is an egg? It's a chicken's period. Why are we arguing about whose chicken periods have got higher welfare standards than somebody else's?
And why don't they put mildly less shite on one of those red tractor things on the side of an egg packet?
Oh, red tractor stands for exactly that, mildly less shite.
There it is. And one here about coffee cups. This was quite disturbing. This is a warning over eco coffee cups that pose a risk to health.
Yes, it made me laugh as well. They've got some toxic resin in them. Some of them, I guess, not all of them, and they're not easy actually to recycle. There's bamboo and toxic resin making up some of these cups, and it's you're just better off with a bit of plastic, unfortunately.
Yeah, which is not how it should be, right?
It's not, and it's not how it looks, right? You think, I got a bamboo cup. Actually, take care, because it could be impregnated with toxic resin.
Of course. Final question. This comes from Karen, who says, do you think there should be an inquiry into the government fraud when the Tories lose the next election?
There should be one now, but because we've had enough of it, haven't we? I mean, over PPE, and the gifting of huge contracts to Tory friends and donors who delivered nothing. They delivered nothing usable to the NHS and all that kind of stuff. I think there's a lot of material there. I think there will be a push for it, and I think with any luck we'll have a government that are more sympathetic to an inquiry than the one we've got now.
Great answer, Dale. That is it for this episode. We will speak. We'll speak in a week.
Good one. I'm looking forward to it. See you later.
Cheers, Dale. See you later. Don't forget, of course, to follow this podcast from your podcast provider. That way you get each new episode automatically. Leave a review there as well. Really important stuff. And, of course, follow Dale on Twitter, which is twitter.com/DaleVince, facebook.com/DaleVince, and on TikTok too.
Zero carbon.
East of.